Let's talk about February book review and the upcoming book for March. I'm Rochelle Fry. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I am sharing today about books that I read for personal growth, and hopefully will encourage you to do some reading of your own. So I had introduced this book in a book spotlight for February. This is It's Not Hysteria by Dr. Karen Tang. I did finish this book. It was a really good book, and it's relevant to me because I'm actually having surgery next week for endometriosis. So shout out to all my endo warriors out there. It's a lot of chronic pain to live in. And I basically just wanted to start off by going over the parts of the book and then just giving you kind of just a brief overview of my thoughts on it. So the first part of this book is she gives a lot of background information. I'm just kind of going over what's in the contents. So she goes over the history of hysteria, which is a way that they use to historically label women to avoid dealing with women's issues in a legitimate way. It was just basically used to marginalize women. She goes over the history of that. There's a chapter on anatomy and sex ed, which is why I would also recommend this book, not just for women, but for all men to read as well, so that they can have a better understanding of people in their life. The next section is self-assessment and communicating with your healthcare provider, which also can be very challenging because it discusses the undereducation of healthcare providers, not being properly educated in women's health issues, which I've heard from other people is true, but I also know is true from my own personal experience of, the average person getting diagnosed with endometriosis. It takes, I think, 7 to 10 years for someone to get an actual diagnosis. So this is, a disease that 1 in 10 women has, and not most. I've never had a healthcare provider even bring this up as possibly being an option. Like, basically, I figured out that I had it on my own and had to be very aggressive and push for, healthcare related to that. So it is very challenging for women to get proper health care. It's not just for endometriosis, but just for, a lot of women's issues related to, childbirth, pelvic floor issues, things like that. And I personally think every woman should experience, pelvic floor physical therapy if they've had childbirth, because it causes, short-term and long-term issues in a lot of women. So the idea that, healthcare providers aren't always adequately educated is a really important topic. Part 2 in this book is, what's the situation? What are you dealing with? So she goes over in depth, talking about fibroids, endometriosis, adenomyosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, PCOS, ovarian cysts, pelvic floor dysfunction, pelvic organ prolapse, urinary incontinence, sexual dysfunction, vulvovaginal conditions, premenstrual syndrome, and premenstrual dysphoric disorder, which is worse than premenstrual syndrome, perimenopause, menopause, infertility, miscarriage, gender diversity, intersex, and cancer. Those are all the topic issues she covers. And then part 3 discusses what are the treatments for these issues. She talks about birth control, hysterectomy, sterilization, abortion, gynecologic exams and office procedures, and weighing your options. So it's extensive, it's comprehensive. I do appreciate the book in that because people are undereducated and providers are undereducated. My thoughts are that every woman should read this, but I believe every man should also read it if they're willing to, because it does give a greater understanding. I'm pushing 50, and there are definitely a lot of things in this book that I did not already know, had not been educated about. So I think, just for the sake of discussing, self-awareness, I do think it's important that we educate ourselves, especially about our own bodies. So I would recommend this book for everybody. And my book spotlight, my preview for March is I'm reading this book. This is Uncultured. It's by Daniella Mestyanek Young. I hope I didn't butcher her last name. She's also known as the Knitting Cult Lady, and she has an account on YouTube and TikTok. She's a very fascinating person with a very complex history that she talks about quite a bit. And I'm really excited about reading her book. From what she says, she grew up in the Church of God cult, and then she went on to go into the military, and she kind of compares how the military can function similarly to a cult. And then she, I believe she's a combat veteran, one of the first women combat veterans. And then she ended up going to Harvard, and then she ended up writing this book. And I think she has another book that's getting ready to come out. So I have not read this book. I have listened to her talk a lot about her experiences, and I love her account. But I'm really excited to read this book, and I will let you know at the end of the month what my thoughts are about it. And I hope that you are, if you aren't reading these books, that you are finding something that's going to stretch you and teach you things that you did not know. And also especially read books that help you understand people's perspectives that are different than your own. It helps build empathy. Hope you have a good day.